Hello, 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 Internet. So, let's take a look at something. There are a number of things that I have noticed that a lot of people just aren't aware of when it comes to space engineers, and I'm talking about relatively experienced creators who know what they're doing for the most part and tend to miss some niche out of the way things that space engineers has. So, let's go with a one that not a lot of people are aware of that is a thing. When you start a new game with the new menu here, you have different selections of content to start with. Now, these greatly affect your ability to respawn in the world. I will start with an example. In the classic sandbox solar system, we will hit start, we will change nothing. The scenario settings for the different worlds have a variety of high-impact effects that change how the game works. So being aware of what those settings do and how they operate in the game, and how some things are hidden and not really discussed in any of the settings. Come on. Here we go. Alright, so this is by far one of the more important screens in the game. The respawn screen. In most scenarios, you can reach the respawn menu by hitting the backspace key. And it will bring you to this screen. It will start you with a default nothing. You will spawn near other players in space. The default empty suit spawn. Now, the problem with that is that in this scenario, we have the whole solar system, so we have a whole variety of different spawns available to us for a variety of different planets. Now, these used to be different. They have changed dramatically over the years as various updates have changed the ships you start with. Modern spawns, unless you start in the space pod, you start with a small grid ship only, be it a rover or a flat-out drop pod. The space pod is a holdover from when they used to be one of the only methods of spawning in the game. Was just flat-out dropping you into the world space in a ship in space, because we didn't have planets. One of the most prominent old starts used to be something very similar to what we have now in the space pod. It used to be the utility craft, otherwise referred to as the banana boat. A large grid spaceship that had a refinery, an assembler, a medical room, a number of thrusters. Now, the problem with the banana boat and the space pod in general is that it spawns you somewhere within a few kilometers of other players. That means that, depending on the cooldowns of the server you can have a player spawn in a vessel like this and fling it at player-made creations or obstructions within the space repeatedly with no cost to themselves, generating a large amount of debris, destroying any player-made creations in the process. It is very possible to bring a server to its knees with several dozen survival pods being thrown at fairly large creations and breaking them up into clang chunks. Now, these days the performance has been hammered on for a number of years until it's not quite as much of a problem. And most public servers now have reasonable respawn timers that mean that anyone attempting to follow the childlike zeal of throwing several dozen of these at a target coordinate within the span of a few minutes is much more difficult to do. I myself played on servers that experienced this lag death as dedicated griefers would get in, spawn in a ship, launch it at a designated coordinate that someone's space station or asteroid base happened to be located at, They would start the ship in motion towards said object or location, and respawn, leaving a floating, high-speed, large grid object hurtling at a target location. And they could do this as fast as they could hit backspace and spawn, and paste in the coordinates to find, and then go head towards it. So they could very quickly overwhelm any defense a reasonable player could establish, with a tide of vessels that were unstoppable and at no cost. So that's a thing. But just to give it the fair shake, we have the pod here. I will go ahead and respawn in it, and we will take a look here. The space pod is a great spawn start. It's wonderful. It has just about everything you need in limited quantity. It has enough to get you going, to get you started. That's the V key and the F key. To interact with things, of course. I'm going to depressurize the main cabin here. The space pod is a fairly standard space start. Here, it's put me in the middle of the solar system here. It's a pretty good start. It's very similar to the banana boat. It's just got a much smaller interior space, leaving much to be desired. A common retrofit for this is to mount a large drill off the front of the survival kit so that it's plumbed rock straight into the system for processing. So, as you can see, there's a lot to this. There's a lot of interesting things to learn about the game systems. Using this start, the survival kit does all the things you need it to do. You can access the survival kit from here without other needs. You can also, through the connected internal conveyor network, see it goes here, then up, then over, then down, and into these, where it has other storage. That's relatively basic space engineer's information. Once you know how these connection systems work, you can figure out that this turns ice into hydrogen and oxygen. That is a hydrogen generator. That is an oxygen tank. You have no way to store hydrogen fuel off the start except for the small internal tank here and the small reserves inside the generator. Now, it is important to note that this is basically all you really need to get started in Space Engineers, especially in a limited or small player scenario. You don't really need much more than this to get started, and really a good early adaptation for this to make sure that you wouldn't run out of power from the batteries behind these plates here would be to slap some solar panels on the tops or the sides or whatever configuration you would desire. Now, let us go back to the main menu, and I will show you the difference, because what happens in Exchange is that there's a lot of planets there and a lot of options. So if you're trying to run a guided experience or to create a scenario, a lot of people will go, hey, why don't I just use this empty world? Let's start with this. Let's start with an empty world. Let's say you've grabbed a planetary mod for an interesting start experience. You've got, oh, okay, I'm in the world. Oh, wow, I just started straight away in it. Well, that's because for the empty world, a lot of this advanced settings are different for empty world than they are for solar system start. So without looking at your advanced start, you've got a completely different set of rules that you don't know what are because you haven't looked at them. Now, also, something important to note, when I hit backspace here, you're going to see the big difference. There is no planet, therefore there is no ability to respawn. Respawn in the suit. Oh, I'm in a random location in space, not too far away from my original start location. Now, it's Alt F10 for admin tools. We go down here to global permissions. We have all of our permission lists. These are important. These are also set in the advanced options menu, but they are also controllable here. where you can allow damage, allow shooting, drilling, welding, grinding, building projection, voxel hands, landing gear lock, and conversion to station. These are important for situations where you have a group of players and you're trying to give them room to breathe and figure out how things work, and you've got hostiles coming in and you go, okay, I want people to have time to do their intros, to sit here and go, I don't want them to be able to break anything, so I'm going to turn damage and grinding off so they can build, they just can't break anything. So this is where you would say, for instance, in Remy's recent Space Engineers example, where you have a host of players on a ship trying to figure out how things work, and you're being attacked by pirates. This is the screen where you would go, I want the pirates to show up and start attacking us while we're not yet ready to not be able to do anything to us. This is one option for limiting their ability to do damage. Another option is a safe zone. You create a safe zone. You get a wonderful little bubble. This is Keen's attempt at dealing with a need for somewhere on dedicated servers for players to be safe, or for NPC structures to be invulnerable to damage. NPC trade stations will have a field like this. They have a number of options and controls. So that's the open spot. On the button, hold on. So you can control the safe zone. Zone is enabled or not. Here, when you enable it and you aren't on the allowed list, it will do what it just did to me. Kick it out. So it is important that before you turn it on, you make sure that the people you want to be allowed to be in are able to be allowed in. For instance, having everyone in a player-made faction so that they don't get kicked out. Or you can set it to blacklist. So now, everyone and everything is allowed in the field. Notice I'm no longer being kicked out because the blacklist only kicks out things on the blacklist rather than it being a whitelist. And it's the simplest and fastest way to allow everyone into a admin-created safe zone there. Now, we will remove that safe zone. Now, let's take a moment here to do a thing. Nope, not with half labs. G key. So, another thing worth remembering. You want to give players the ability to feed a safe zone. The safe zone generator block. It's going to need power. So you're going to need the spawn menu again. Choose admin tools, enable creative. And use all terminals is a good thing to have always on, so that even if you aren't in the right faction, can get into things. Let's see. There we go. Shift F10. Once again, that's Shift F10 for the items menu. So you can spawn specific items. For instance, I love the new search feature. It's great. Let's go with 100 spawn object zone chips. Zone chips are an NPC tradable object. Put in these things. You can only hold 5, so you're gonna need to do one of those things of cargo. There. Now I'm pretty certain, since the scenario is in creative mode, we don't actually need to power the generator. It can just be here and be on. But we can now go, hey, safe zone. Grid has to be converted to a station for this to work. Convert to station. Control panel. Save zone. And let's go on. Set range. The higher the range, the faster it's going to use up those zone chips. But they also get configure filter. And they are also going to want to do this and make sure that they understand how it works. They get the same options: damage, shooting, welding, drilling, grinding, building, projections, voxel hands, landing gear, convert to station. Note, these settings do not, I repeat, do not override server settings. Hello, hello. So yeah, with a safe zone, you have the ability to control many of the interior options available to players here. It's initializing in 50 seconds. That's one of those multiplayer balance things where it's if they take time to turn on and off, it limits people's ability to abuse them. No. Something else worth noting. Let's grab a cockpit here. Now, let's just say for a hot instant here. Ooh. Not those. There we go. Whoop. Oh, was I not on the list? I wasn't on the list of my own generator. Guess what? This part of it that's outside, I can go, hey, I need to manage something that's here. Voila. Now, I suppose that's another thing worth talking about. Safe zones only affect objects that are more than 50% inside them. So if it's not, it won't help. Here we are in a little example ship. Now, F9 puts you into spectator mode. F8 gives you free camera. F6 puts you back in first person. Let's go GPS. Create new from current. Always visible. Show on HUD. Very important for keeping the position of it always visible. Now, when I go into this mode, the default spectator position can now find out where the hell I am in space. So, something that is worth discussing for a hot moment in Space Engineers here is that in Spectator Cam here, I now have a number of controls. I can hold Shift and mouse wheel to control my speed of my camera. So I can do it very slowly for a dramatic turn. If you have a controller set up, you can do some very cool panning arcs using gradualized controls. Mouse and keyboard tends to get a bit spazzy. This is how I was following a number of ships in various videos that I've made in the past. We can get right up into people inside the ships here. Oh, this thing doesn't work. Now, there is an important feature worth discussing real quick, that if you need to move a ship that you're in, and you're like, oh, it's going to take forever to fly over there. Well, control space while in spectator camera will teleport you. And if you happen to be in a seat when you do that, it will teleport the whole ship. The whole thing. Yeah, really. So if you need a ship to be somewhere else quickly, and you don't have time for the jump drive animation to spool up and activate, you can just, do the thing. Nope, nope. Wrong button. There we go. So, once again, we will go F9, F8. Oh no, there I am in space. Oh no, there I am over there. Oh, there I am over here. Frequently needed for moving admin control around, and if you like, I need to be over there, out of the way of a thing I'm trying to move, because you can famously not be able to paste something over a person. Notice how once it's overlapping, Oh no! There's a dude in the way. It won't let me put it down. There's something in the way. Now notice that doesn't just include the areas where the blocks physically are. The empty space also obstructs the ability to spawn the object. So anything that might occlude the whole set of coordinates of the object will prevent you from being able to copy it. Now, another thing that is also worth investigating real quick is that, gee, I've got this object and it's got a blueprint. I should name it something. Let's go with I've named it Blobbert1. It is my blueprint of a safe zone. I'm going to go Control B, and that gets me a blueprint of the object I am looking at. If I have permission to use the object I am looking at, I now have large grid Blobbert1. It has taken the screenshot, it is watching, it is looking and going, yes, large grid Blobbert1 local blueprint. Very useful. I now have a copy of that in my blueprints. Having that named appropriately is always good. Now, something else that worth mentioning is that, let's say I came through and I made some changes and added some things and went, I need another cargo box over there, and I've made a bunch of changes to the object in question, but I haven't changed its name, and I go, okay, I should take a blueprint of that again. Well, here's what happens. It takes the same name of the object again and adds an incrementer after the name. So if you, say, have a group of friends that are building some ships on your flight deck of your carrier, and you're like, gee, you've made some modifications to that, and you want to save it for later, maybe they should look at it and hit that Control B and take a blueprint real quick and have the latest version of whatever blueprint they're wanting to use on hand. Now, that's great for local players when they want to create something in survival mode and they want to preserve a copy of it. It's also great for admins who go, shit, I need another copy of your fighter craft because everything got blown up and I want this to continue without taking too overly long. For instance, I'm going to copy one of these vanilla star bases, or should I say stations, in here. Our future experiments here. Now, you will very quickly discover a copy of a vanilla station. It's owned by the player faction that pasted it, and has absolutely nothing to offer. It is a functionally decorative set piece. Admins can come in and set up trades and things for various things, but it will not have automatically restocking contracts or content. Only NPC economy systems work with the economy system is notorious for being difficult to use and an utter pain in the ass to modify, change, or, well, just use in general. Because The system for contracts and administration is notoriously difficult to parse. Still. No, there are a number of other features related to the spawning of ships, the using of the filters here to select certain things from certain areas. For instance, this ship has, you will notice, a number of blocks that appear to be missing. Yeah, there was something here, but it's gone now. Oh, there were blocks over here, but they're gone now. A number of gaps and holes in the structure indicate that this grid, that little box that popped up as I was pasting it in, said that it had blocks from mods that don't exist. So, this lovely little contraption here has a bunch of missing things. Now, that's another thing worth remembering, is that also, if you're the admin, you have the use all terminals. You can do things like, let's take everything here and give it to the space pilots. This is now a hostile ship. But, because I have use all use all terminals. Keep original ownership on paste is what happens when I go, this is an enemy vessel? I'd like to take this enemy vessel and copy it. So now that I've copied this, I still don't own this. This is still not mine. See? Still owned by space pirates. So that is a useful tool for placing and creating content for players to engage with on a custom server or scenario being managed by someone organizing an event, for instance, Remy. Take all of these wonderful blueprints and put them to use in a variety of useful and interesting things. Now, other admin tools that are useful, such as show all players, ignore safe zones, ignore PCU limits, the ability to control the time of day. The entity list is the next one, grids. Now, you will see here that I have these blueprints here, and the number of these encounter blueprints. So thousands of kilometers away from my current location is one of the built-in global encounters from the new Factorum, complete with NPC ships and stations, ready to take on whatever challenge we may throw at it. It is entirely possible to manage these grids from here, removing things from existence. So, for instance, if I was using this as a base of operations for my players, aka other content creators or fellow YouTubers, to base out of to get a hand on things, and I saw a couple of hostile signatures approaching that I didn't want to have to deal with, I can use the F10 menu, the admin screen, open it up and go, gee, I don't think I want them to have to deal with that just yet. I'm going to remove those and keep an eye on things. Let's put myself right back here. So, other important part of this spawn menu is you can spawn asteroids, predefined, procedural, and planets. So you can minimize the amount of lag in your world by having only the planet that you need in a given scenario. It's great and all, the Earth-like start world, to have multiple planets, moons. Now, you will notice here that those are both now the same size. They're the smallest possible planetary circumference. Now, it is tempting and quite enthralling to want to have all of the different planets available in the same solar system. The difficulty lies in that each of these planets, just existing in your world, cargo ship has spawned in, just these existing in your save file are relatively large and create a fair amount of lag that builds and mounts over time. And I would say that it has been categorically demonstrated on a number of occasions from various streamers and the events that they have hosted on a variety of different discords and different platforms that you do not need more than one planet. Because a perfect example scenario of this is PvPvP by the Armco community hosted by Wasted Space. It created a number of YouTuber-led or Twitch caster-led teams that were competing in a team environment, meeting at regular intervals, where it became evident that deep space encounters between players is a nigh-on impossible thing unless they are orchestrated ahead of time. I would say a great and wonderful example of this is the distributed coordinates of events as hosted by Last Stand Gamers on their servers, where they would publicize an event and what those coordinates for that event would be dropped on the day of, so that players would bring their ships and their supplies and their player base to the hosted events at the designated coordinates, where they would otherwise be free to travel and engage each other as necessary on the server, under the established server guidelines. This is a well-known facet of Space Engineers server hosting, that any server will have guidelines as to how to act, how to proceed in the multiplayer environment, and the PvP activity that is common to a lot of Space Engineers in unregulated server environments is very much like that of Rust. Whereas if you're offline and players discover a way to destroy your base, too bad, so sad. There is a long lineage of Space Engineers servers that have been hollowed out and reduced to lag-filled messes by coordinated offline strikes on large offline player bases that have reverted the server to a large, lag-tastic nightmare of disjointed, destroyed pieces catapulting through space at relativistic speeds. This has been a series of problems in the evolution of Space Engineers' engine over the years, and has led to a number of interesting workarounds. For instance, while some objects beyond player range, synchronization range, are simulated, it is only in the most tangential ways. For instance, when a drone-commanded vessel operating on autopilot using the fancy new NPC systems gets outside your synchronization range, it ceases to function. Nothing more than basic trajectory and navigation. This has been demonstrated most recently by Splitsies and Shax's colony battleground, where they are building a fleet of ships to take on various NPC fleets of various mods. But he, Splitsy, took the time to experiment with various AI-controlled drones that refused to function when beyond the synchronization range of the player, which is normally a very small range. You will notice that that is a range that is set in the hosting of the world. For instance, that's 9K out and approaching. Do you see that dot? That's 9 kilometers away. I'm sure it's very difficult to make out in the stream and later in YouTube, but I can look at the asteroids and the stars of the skybox and pick out that as an object. Oh, it's literally just vanished. Yep, it's gone. The signal for the object that was there is gone, and so is the object itself. It is despawned. It exited range, so it is gone. It is highly unlikely that object even still exists within the game files. Even if I were to save and exit right now and try and find it and say something like SE Toolbox, which allows you to examine the save file programmatically. Let's see. Next tip. Debug draw. You don't normally need that. Spawn menu. Admin screen. Grids, names. Even characters. I love how in the character control menu it gives you the option to take player control of someone's character. I don't know if that actually does anything. I have never tried. But yeah, you have a number of categories in here. All kinds of fun things. Oh, I now have all of these different planets. Let's remove that one. Now, I have been told a number of interesting things about various other controls here that are very useful. The replay tool is the same tool that they use to create all of the intro cinematics for the game, where they create a character, have it move and do a thing, and this would be its own set of tutorials of specifically how to use this to create interesting cutscenes and cinematics for the purposes of creating your own interesting series, as it were. I prefer the wasted space method of just use actual people. Use genuine multiplayer content to create your things. Weather simulations, it's another point of controversy for Space Engineers players, is the weather system is rudimentary at best. Here I am loading the planet at high speed. Here we go. Voila! I am on the planet. The control spacebar teleport of admin is wonderful. Force random weather. Current weather, fog light. There are a number of mods that, particularly one by Frosty, that allows you to gradually have the weather change rather than instantly change. But yeah, interesting things. Also, it is important to note that rovers are usually a bad choice on vanilla planets because of shit like this. Let's do that so that I get my aligned grid. Use my rotation keys and voila, away we go. So another thing bears demonstration. am sitting in the cockpit of that ship moving at high speed, and it is about to enter a steep and quite eventful dive. And I have kept my inertia when teleporting. Notice how it does not take my facing information. So the direction you're pointing when you teleport is preserved from the moment of teleportation, as well as direction and inertia. I'm headed down at high speed, and there is jack shit. Teleporting is going to do a change about that. So if you're traveling at high speed as an admin and you press control space to try and get away from something, but you happen to be, say, next to the ground when that happens, well, let's just say that you have predictable results. Now remember, we have allow damage off. So nothing has happened because we have damage off. Normally we would crater quite wildly. Yeah. So, let's take a look at something else. Objects. Oh, trash removal. This is a much maligned feature that barely works sometimes. The whole point of the trash removal is to deal with a surplus of combat debris, where an NPC or player constructions are fragmented or destroyed in chunks that are then catapulting off into the void of space at high speed, where you're then relying on the system to automatically, over time, clean up those leftover pieces that are unlikely to be needed or necessary for the future of the server. Does it need to be powered? Does it need to be controlled? Does it need to have production, respawn point? With respawns could be dangerous because your players can only respawn, you know? So there are world settings that make it so that players can only respawn not at the list of respawn points, but at med bays or survival kits. So turning that off means that they can now delete anything pretty much anywhere. So for instance, deleting a stationary object when they're moving with less than 20 blocks distance from player, more than 500. Now, I have seen many things like this take time to take effect. Another one is voxels. Now, this is a feature called voxel regeneration. It can sometimes take quite a while to take effect, and sometimes it can even take a reload to actually kick in and do the thing. So you can set these to be quite low or quite repeated. Now, there are a number of different ways to think about voxel revision as a feature. It can be used to create spanning underground bases, yes. Digging into a mountainside also creates a huge amount of lag. We have demonstrated this on a number of occasions in a number of bases. It is always a bad idea to do underground bases. Always. Now, the problems with this are that it's been minimized slightly recently. It used to be that every single terrain modification was kept. Every single one. Filling, removing. Every time an NPC crashed into the ground and left a hole, that was permanently preserved forever. So that you had multiple kilometers of terrain changes being kept at any given time. if you stayed put for any length of time, because, well, let's just say another also common problem was the unknown signals or NPC grids from various spawning mods, perhaps not dealing with planetary gravity well, or crashing into terrain they had failed to avoid or been damaged and crashed into, creating a number of furrowed tracks around the base. So the more you defended a base, the more the area around it was littered with pockmarks, holes, and craters. This is especially apparent when you're dealing with Armageddon mode scenarios. This was evident in a recent stream, or I should say relatively recent stream, with Mackle GDMS on that stream, where we had a large player-run but shielded facility that was the target of multiple hours of apocalypse-level meteor strikes, meaning that the entire area around it was pockmarked with meteor strikes. That because voxel reversion was off, whoops, that's not the button I was meaning to push, but because voxel reversion was off, the literal thousands of asteroid strikes were doing nothing. So let's demonstrate that real quick, just to have some thoroughness here. All right, let's go with a new game. Let's go with let's not use any of these story scenario, no, PvP scenario, original content, Earth planet. There we go. Oh, bother, I forgot to set the asteroid difficulty. Well, that's part of what we can do next, and go back and modify a world that we're loading. Here's our world, here's our medbay, Earth start. Voila! Classic Earth start, drones enabled, enemies to go fight, vanilla, keen, at its, let's call it laziest? Yes, laziest. Exit, save as, yes. Next to my menu. Didn't necessarily need to save again, but the point remains the same. Alright, no, not that one. Load game, there we go. Earth planet, edit settings, advanced. Now, here is where a lot of how to play the game really gets decided. Character inventory size. This really determines the amount of grind you want to have to deal with, how necessary you want to make teamwork or welding or grinding ships or systems. This is the setting that motivates people to use grinding walls or welding walls to print chips, because the ability of the character to hold enough pieces to build things is by far the number one motivator of construction. Having to repeatedly go back to get parts 6 or 7 times to build one block really force people to consider doing things by themselves. So realistic is great for forcing teamwork, because a small inventory size means that it is a pain in the absolute rear to do anything by yourself. Period. Simply because the number of runs back and forth between a block and a cargo access to do things in person, or the amount of thoroughness you need in setting up welding and grinding ships so that they have the cargo necessary to construct anything of note or enact sizable, worthwhile repairs on battle damage or design construction. Assembler efficiency, refinery efficiency, welding speed, grinding speed, all of these things are indicators of how fast and what kind of gameplay you want to encourage in your particular scenario. They have lasting effects, and making the grinding speed take forever just means that it takes forever to get through enemy grids. This means grinding speed set to realistic, I believe, would be one of a primary motivator to discourage hydromanning. Now, if you don't know what hydromanning is when you take a player and you fly up to a grid and pull out your grinder and literally start grinding it apart to combat an enemy grid. Be this a player grid, be this an NPC grid, be this a story grid, the ability to grind down any enemy block you encounter, the grinding speed of that, determines how practical it is to take on an enemy just with no suit, with nothing, with just a grinder and gumption to live. Now, seeing as the grinder is often an engineer's last resort, leaving it at 2 times, 5 times, is helpful, because you're already throwing yourself at the enemy Russian human wave style. Doesn't get much lower or much worse than that. If you're that desperate, you have no weapons with which to fight back, and you're literally using your grinder to defend yourself as you respawn time and time again to take on an enemy grid, you want that grinding to be effective, to have an actual chance to save your base, your production facilities, whatever ship you have left, whatever supplies you have left. If you've already taken catastrophic combat damage and are in a bad way, having a reasonable grinding speed means that you can fall back on your grinder to maybe have a chance at defending your equipment, your grid, your supplies. You can also set it to 0.5 and make it so that any salvaging of grids is a long, slow, extremely laborious, and mind-numbing process, encouraging the advanced use of welding mods to take, salvage, save, and recover as much material as possible rather than trying to grind your way through it, using weapons to blast your way through a limited number of blocks that you absolutely have to get to where you need to go, using merged blocks to salvage equipment as much as you can, because grinding it down is a pain in the ass, encourages particular kinds of playstyles. Now, one of the more important environmental settings here is this: safe, normal, cataclysm, Armageddon. This setting is infamous in a number of different circles, mainly the Armco communities, Armageddon settings where you have extreme amounts of spiders and asteroids destroying everything you know and love from above. Now, this is also ties into what I was discussing earlier about voxel regeneration. If you have Armageddon and you have a planet, we will go in and we will take a look at that in a minute of what that does to a location over a period of time. Another important decision to make when hosting a world or creating a scenario is arcade or realistic sounds. The realistic sounds mean that you only hear the sounds directly attached to the grids you're standing on, or sounds that are near to you when you're in atmosphere. Arcade means that there is a much more lenient sound system in place that is based on proximity alone rather than transmission from medium or direct connection. Now, world size is another important distinction that, when changed, can really shake up the game. Now, the other one, what I was talking about before, view distance. This is also your synchronization range. When you can see things, you can activate things. So, 5K. You are basically on top of things before you can see them and interact with them, before the game sends your world information for things heading towards you, near you, or around you. 7K. I should note that this is about the range of the default large grid railgun. You can shoot anything pretty much within that. I think it's the 9K that is its max range, so if you can see it on a 10K world view distance, you can basically shoot it. 15K is the standard, 20K is extended, and the 50K is going to slow down anything but the chunkiest of machines. This setting is for if you have a absolute unit of a server and a system to play it with, because this will slow everything down. You want to go back to the days of bad lag and horribly running worlds? Use this, because you'll have so much loaded at once it will slow everything down. 15 or 20 is what you want to stick at. Here, the next option is the respawn ship cooldowns. These are important for a number of reasons. You can have them disabled, you can have the default. Now, disabled does not mean that respawns are off. Despite what it may sound like, cooldowns disabled means that you can respawn as fast as you can die. This is the original method in which Space Engineers operated. It's the bad way in which Space Engineers operated. Public servers don't use this because they die horrifically to griefers that spawn a million ships and do nothing. There are options that have been introduced later that try and mitigate things of that nature, but, you know, for high-activity servers with high griefing, increasing the cooldowns beyond the defaults slows down griefing activity. Now, another one that's quite useful is day duration. This ties into part of the day-night system for Space Engineers and how it is it's a very strange workaround. The day-night system for Space Engineers uses a world light skybox, meaning that the sun is not an actual object, it is a part of the skybox around the play world. So it rotates around the player, not the other way around. Max objects, of course, this is the thing that if this is high, it means your world performs poorly. Maximum number of small objects floating in space or ingots components. Warning, values higher than 64 can significantly affect its performance because it is tracking all of its position and velocity data. Global encounter cap, of course, maximum of 2 because they have quite large encounters. Animal NPC limit, this is important for, say, the number of spiders attacking you on an Armageddon world. If you're attempting to run an Armageddon world and you want to be choked by spiders at all times, you want this to be very high. Or conversely, very low, so you get good performance but a reasonable number of spiders. Block limits. This determines, well, the number of blocks your players can use, the total number of PCU you want to allow in the world. PCU is, well, let's just say it's a relative cost of the number of blocks a vessel or structure has in the world, so you can do things like, I want my players to have the ability to build a reasonable base and some good ships. 35,000 block size, yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, you want to limit people to small ships. You're going to turn that down. We're like, oh, okay, you can only get a small ship, but you make it a good one. Delete respawn ships. Now, this has changed a lot since its inception. There are a number of ways that I have famously gotten around this setting in various conditions and settings on various servers. Now, one of the things that is easily used by this setting to prevent it is that it says that your respawn ship, when you leave the server or you spawn a new ship, your respawn ship will be deleted. There is a system by which you can use in-game systems called merge blocks to bypass this system. I have recently been made aware that to a certain extent this has been mitigated by merged ships. When they unmerge, when a spawn ship is unmerged, it reverts to being a spawn ship. Now, the other way to get around that has existed since the inversion of that scenario is that it used to be that you could take a spawn ship, merge it to a station, demerge it from the station, and then it would no longer count as a respawn ship, and then it would stay as a new entity. That is no longer the case now. So, the original method of resource spamming would be that you would then take that ship, merge it to a station, and completely deconstruct it to build the station, converting those resources you get from the respawn ship into resources for the station. This is part of, I would guess, the intended gameplay loop, where you use that respawn ship to get the resources, either via mining or processing, to create a station. There used to be a number of respawn vessels, mining vessels, refining vessels, scouting vessels. Now they only have the one, the space pod or the default atmospheric landers and the rover. So, they've gotten some grips with that changed things a little bit. Auto healing is a divisive setting. Having it on or off can make or break various people's enjoyment. Spectator is great for, I'm a content creator and I want to be able to see what the hell is going on with the other players on the other side of the planet or asteroid base or whatever the heck is happening, where you can hit your F9, F8 and move your camera to go look at what's going on. Some scenarios start with it on, most don't. Permanent death. Permanent death is another controversial setting because it enables players losing everything if they die and don't have any available respawn points, meaning they would have to start completely over. Now, this setting is interesting because it doesn't necessarily work the way most people think it does. It is useful for creating one-shot hardcore scenarios where if a player dies and they don't have a respawn point, they lose everything. And if they lose everything, they just can't play anymore. It is also great for creating hardcore servers where if someone is playing and they die, they are, unless they have a resolute faction that has spawn points, they're effectively kicked off the server because they now have no way to spawn. This is counteracted by a lot of public servers using this setting but having a public spawn point with a field where they can get in game and start playing and have ships given out to create a limited scenario where they say, I have this team and these people and these factions. And everything is built out of what we have seeded the world with. Cargo ships is a well-discussed topic that has a lot of different features and advantages, creating NPC ships. In-game scripts allows for a lot of in-game scripting shenanigans. It can brick servers using old scripts, broken scripts. It is important to have people with access and knowledge of how to actually use the in-game scripts. If you have them on, they are important and quite useful for doing a variety of advanced things like building subgrid wheels, articulated control arms, cranes, all kinds of advanced creations open up when you have in-game scripts available. They're pretty handy. Tool and weapon shake. They make your weapons shake when you use them. They make your tools and your ship shake when you use it. Adaptive simulation quality is one of those settings even I do not entirely understand and know anything about. So I would leave that option for someone else to discuss. Random encounters, of course, randomly abandoned ships and stations. I definitely want to encounter those. Hey, planetary encounters, give me more of those. Unsupported stations. This is another setting that is important, that has changes to how your game works. Now, way back in the day of the early space engineers, one of my favorite tricks for getting NPC grids to slow down to the point at which multiplayer could actually work, because by default NPC grids would be catapulting through the play space at a certain speed, and that speed for a lot of servers was too fast for ping to keep up with, so you would have a stutter or jitter in your player's location. So when you would try to combat an enemy NPC ship traveling at speed, you would end up merging into it or glitching out of it or getting killed by it because it was traveling at 7 meters a second, or whatever speed it was. And so one of my favorite tactics was navigating ahead of it, getting in front of it, and dropping station blocks that the ship would then run into.
Hello.
I have family things coming up, so I'll have to resume this breakdown of settings and advanced tips and technologies that Space Engineers has at a later date.